One of the men responsible for security for U.S. diplomats in Libya says tonight that he feared for their safety long before the attack last month on the consulate in Benghazi. 4 Americans were killed, as you recall, including Ambassador Chris Stevens. The military security officer will tell his story to Congress on Wednesday, but tonight he sits down with Cheryl Atkinson.
Army Green Beret Lieutenant Colonel Andrew Wood first set foot in Libya last February to lead an elite 16-man military security team with expertise in counterterrorism. From the moment he arrived, he says he saw chaos.
With shooting incidents that occurred, many instances involving the local security guard force that we were training there. Constantly, there was battles going on between militias, criminal activity, and that became increasing danger as time went on as well.
Wood met daily with Ambassador Christopher Stevens to discuss security. That's Stevens on the right and Colonel Wood on the left at a Memorial Day service in Tripoli.
Was he concerned about security?
He was. He was constantly concerned about the threats to not just himself, but the entire staff there.
Was there what you saw as a visible security drawdown during the period of time you were in Libya?
Yes, and it began just shortly after I arrived. There was pressure to reduce the number of security people there.
Pressure from where?
Higher headquarters at State Department.
Over 6 months leading up to the attack on Ambassador Stevens, Wood says the security situation in Libya deteriorated. There were 13 threats or attacks in Tripoli and Benghazi. Wood says Ambassador Stevens and his staff made the case for tightened security in emails and diplomatic cables, but one by one lost 3 State Department security teams, their only airplane, and eventually Wood's Squad 2.
Did Ambassador Stevens or the regional security officer fight losing another team?
Yes.
Do you feel like there was a disconnect between what you saw on the ground and what the State Department folks in Washington thought was going on in Libya?
There was certainly no disconnect in our transfer of information to them. They were getting the information on the situation on the ground. And we sent it up through State Department cables, and I sent it up to the military side on the DoD side. So there was awareness of what the situation in Libya was about.
How did you get the word that your team would not be allowed to stay?
We knew that was coming through the cables and the draft cables that were going back and forth. The requests were being modified to say, don't even request for DoD support.
So State Department was telling the folks on the ground in Libya, don't continue to ask for this help?
Correct.
Wood says, in his opinion, some of the security teams would have been in Benghazi on September 11th to help the State Department bodyguards if they'd been allowed to remain in Libya.
Does part of you wonder if the security requests had been granted, those deaths could have been avoided?
Yes, yes, I do. I think about that. I spend a lot of time thinking about that.
Colonel Wood says in Special Forces he normally operates in the shadows, but says there was so much misinformation after Ambassador Stevens' death. He says he felt he had relevant information to offer congressional investigators, Scott, so he stepped forward.
Thank you, Cheryl.
The closer we get to the election, the harder Republicans in Congress are pushing for answers to a big question: what really happened in the attack in Benghazi, Libya last month that killed the U.S. ambassador and 3 other Americans? Cheryl Atkinson has been looking into this, and what she found raises new questions about whether the U.S. military could have done more to save the 4 men. She joins us from our Washington bureau this morning. Good morning, Cheryl.
Good morning, Anthony. Now some in Congress are asking why U.S. military help from outside Libya didn't arrive as terrorists battered more than 30 Americans over the course of more than 7 hours. The assault launched by an armed mob of dozens that torched buildings and used rocket-propelled grenades, mortars, and AK-47 rifles.
CBS News has been told that hours after the assault began, an unmanned Predator drone was sent over the U.S. mission in Benghazi. It and other reconnaissance aircraft apparently observed the final hours of the lengthy battle. The State Department, White House, and Pentagon declined to say what military options were available. A White House official told us that at the start of the attack, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs Martin Dempsey and Defense Secretary Leon Panetta looked at available options, and the ones we exercised had our military forces arrive in less than 24 hours, well ahead of timelines laid out in established policies. But it was too late to help the Americans in Benghazi. The ambassador and 3 others were dead. Gary Burnson believes help could have come much sooner. He commanded CIA counterterrorism missions targeting Osama bin Laden and led the team after the U.S. embassy bombings in East Africa.
You find a way to make this happen. There isn't a plan for every single engagement. Sometimes you have to be able to make adjustments. They made 0 adjustments in this. They stood and they watched, and our people died.
The Pentagon says it did move a team of special operators from Central Europe to Sigonella, Italy, but gave no other details. Sigonella is a large naval air station just an hour flight from Libya. Other nearby bases include Aviano and Ceuta Bay. Military sources tell CBS News that resources include fighter jets and Spectre AC-130 gunships, which the sources say can be extremely effective in flying in and buzzing a crowd to disperse it. Rick Nelson, a former Navy pilot who worked in counterterrorism, says such missions are very risky.
What would be the concerns as they're trying to decide whether to send force in quickly?
A lot can go well, right? As we saw with the bin Laden raid, it was a very successful event. But also when there are high risk of activities like this, a lot can go wrong, as we saw with the Iranian hostage rescue, decades ago.
Add to the controversy the fact that the last 2 Americans didn't die until more than 6 hours into the attack, and the question of military help becomes very important. Rebecca?
Cheryl, this question of diplomatic concerns, as we understand it, also played into this. Sending U.S. military into another country's airspace, that can be a sensitive issue.
That was likely part of the discussion. Sending military into another country can be sensitive and delicate. We can say that we've been told Mrs. Clinton did seek clearances from Libya to fly into their airspace, but the administration won't say anything further about what was said or decided on that front.
Cheryl Atkinson in Washington. Thanks, Cheryl.
Good evening. In the weeks before his death, U.S. Ambassador Chris Stevens sent the State Department several requests for increased security for diplomats in Libya. Stevens and 3 other Americans were killed this past September 11th in a terrorist attack on the U.S. consulate in Benghazi and in a separate attack that same night on a safe house where the consulate staff had been evacuated. Stevens' memos were obtained by the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee, which is investigating the attacks, and our Cheryl Atkinson got a hold of the memos today.
Ambassador Stevens personally pressed for strengthened security in a series of cables to State Department headquarters in Washington. On July 9, 2012, Stevens sent a request for extension of temporary duty personnel. That refers to a 16-man military temporary security team with expertise in counterterrorism. They were set to leave in August, but Stevens asked to keep them through mid-September. On August 2nd, 6 weeks before he died, Stevens requested protective detail bodyguard positions, saying the added guards will fill the vacuum of security personnel currently at post who will be leaving within the next month and will not be replaced. He called the security condition in Libya unpredictable, volatile, and violent. It's not known what happened to that request. On August 8th, as the special security teams left Libya, another cable from Stevens says a series of violent incidents has dominated the political landscape and caused them targeted and discriminate attacks. Then, on September 11th, the day the ambassador lost his life, he sent this Benghazi weekly report. It expressed Libyans' growing frustration with police and security forces who were too weak to keep the country secure. Lieutenant Colonel Andrew Wood led the U.S. military team that left Libya in August. He testified before Congress last week.
Did Ambassador Stevens or the regional security officer fight losing another team?
Yes.
How did they do that?
It was quite a degree of frustration on their part. They were, I guess you could say, clenched fist over the whole issue.
Today, the State Department told us an independent board is conducting a thorough review of the assault, Scott, and once they have the results, they can fully address the questions.
Cheryl, thank you. It was 6 weeks ago today that terrorists attacked the U.S. consulate in Benghazi, Libya. Now, we've obtained email alerts that were put out by the State Department as the attack unfolded. As you know, 4 Americans were killed, including Ambassador Christopher Stevens. Cheryl Atkinson has our story.
The emails contain the earliest description so far of what happened at Benghazi the night of the attack. At 4:05 p.m. Eastern Time on September 11, an alert from the State Department Operations Center was issued to a number of government and intelligence agencies. Included were the White House Situation Room, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, and the FBI. U.S. diplomatic mission in Benghazi under attack. Approximately 20 armed people fired shots. Explosions have been heard as well. Ambassador Stevens, who is currently in Benghazi, and 4 chief of mission personnel are in the compound safe haven. At 4:54, less than an hour later, another alert. The firing in Benghazi has stopped. A response team is on site attempting to locate chief of mission personnel. Then at 6:07, state sent out another alert saying the embassy in Tripoli reported the Islamic military group Ansar al-Sharia claims responsibility for Benghazi attack on Facebook and Twitter and has called for an attack on Embassy Tripoli. The emails are just a few in what is likely a large number traded throughout the night, and they're likely to become part of the ongoing political debate over whether the administration attempted to mislead in saying the assault was an outgrowth of a protest rather than a planned attack by terrorists. 14 hours after the attack, President Obama sat down with Steve Kroft of 60 Minutes for a previously scheduled interview and said he did not believe it was simply due to mob violence.
You're right that this is not a situation that was exactly the same as what happened in Egypt. My suspicion is that there are folks involved in this who were looking to target Americans from the start.
The White House and State Department declined comment on the email alerts. The House Oversight Committee, Scott told us the information in the emails will be part of their ongoing investigation into the Benghazi attack.
Cheryl, thank you. Today, a top State Department official defended the level of security in place the night that the U.S. consulate in Benghazi, Libya was attacked. Ambassador Christopher Stevens and 3 other Americans were killed by terrorists on the anniversary of September 11th. Cheryl Atkinson reports a House committee opened a hearing on the attack today.
We also requested
the State Department's Eric Nordstrom was the lead security official in Libya and says he told his headquarters that getting adequate security was the hardest part of his dangerous job.
It's not the hardships, it's not the gunfire, it's not the threats. It's dealing and fighting against the people, programs, and personnel who are supposed to be supporting me. And I added it by saying, for me, the Taliban is on the inside of the building.
Lieutenant Colonel Andrew Wood headed a special military team whose mission ended and was not extended a month before the September 11th attack. He told us he felt the same frustration.
So all the experts on the ground are telling headquarters of the State Department, we need this. And the answer kept coming back as?
You've got to do with less. For what reasons, I don't know.
Charlene Lamb is the State Department official who declined the security requests and today stood her ground.
Sir, we had the correct number of assets in Benghazi at the time of 9/11 for what had been agreed upon.
To start off by saying you had the correct number somehow doesn't seem to ring true to the American people.
Today, White House spokesman Jay Carney echoed the criticism.
There is no question that when 4 American personnel are killed in an attack on a diplomatic facility, that the security there was not adequate to prevent that from happening.
Republicans, including Mike Kelly, also addressed the controversy over why the Obama administration initially portrayed the terrorist attack as a spontaneous outbreak.
Why in the heck did it take so long for all these highly briefed and intelligent people to try and figure out that it actually wasn't a 15-minute YouTube video? It actually was a 9/11 event, a terrorist attack?
State Department Undersecretary Patrick Kennedy said there was no pressure to spin the event, Scott, not at the State Department and not at the White House.
Thank you, Cheryl.